Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to talk about the top 5 books that I read in the fall. If you haven't seen one of my seasonal wrap-ups before, let me give you a quick idea of what this video is. I'm going to be going over all of the books that I read in the fall, which for me includes the months of September, October, and November. I'm going to be listing them all in order of enjoyment, so lowest star rating to highest star rating. And when I get to my top 5 books, I will go more in depth on my thoughts of those books and tell you why I love them so much. I always link the monthly wrap-ups for the 3 months in the description box so that if any of the books that are not in my top 5 are interesting to you or you want to hear more of my thoughts, you can go check out those wrap-ups for those thoughts. I really enjoy doing these videos. I love looking at my reading in 3-month chunks, and I love trying to rank the books that I read and put them in order. I feel like 3 months worth of reading is the perfect amount of books to rank. Because I only read like 4 to 6, occasionally more books in a month, that's not as fun to try and rank. And then on the other side of the spectrum, it's practically impossible to rank books over like a whole year period. At least that's how I feel. So I feel like 3 months worth of books is a good amount of books to rank, and I have a lot of fun trying to figure out the order that I want to put these in. So I read or picked up a total of 17 books in the fall. That is a little on the higher side for me, but I've just been reading a lot more this year than I usually do. I hit my goal of 52 books during the fall, and at this point I'm at like 61, 62 books for the year, when I generally average a book a week. So I'm really happy with that number. So let's take a look at how my ratings kind of shook out. I had 4 2-star books, which is definitely higher than I would like, but what are you gonna do? Sometimes you just don't like a book. One of these 2-star books was actually a DNF, or a book that I chose not to finish. I only had 1 3-star book. I guess I've just been having a lot of like strong feelings about books lately and not just feeling like middle of the road. The biggest category as far as star ratings is definitely my 4-star ratings. I had 8 4-star books, and this is what I'm always shooting for. I always want to have mostly 4-star books, so I'm really happy with this. And I ended up with 4 5-star books. Out of these 17 books, 3 of them were actually rereads, and I don't let rereads qualify for my top 5 spots. I pull those out of the running before I rank them. So I'm gonna go ahead and tell you those right now. One of them was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor, which is the first book in the Strange the Dreamer duology. I reread this just recently for the one readathon to rule them all. It was the Ravenclaw House book for that readathon. And on this read, I gave it 4 stars, even though I have previously given this book 5 stars. My next 2 rereads were the second and third book in the Farseer trilogy. They were Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. I gave Royal Assassin 4 out of 5 stars, and I gave Assassin's Quest 5 out of 5 stars. I had previously read this trilogy like about 10 years ago, so even though they were rereads, I didn't remember much of the story, especially in these 2 books. I remembered a little bit about the first book in the series. I had a lot of fun rereading the series. I wanted to reread it so I could read the rest of the Realm of the Elderling series, and now that this trilogy is done, I am really excited about moving forward. I do want to put out there that Assassin's Quest was probably my favorite book that I read all season, so it's kind of an honorable mention because technically it was a reread, so I didn't put it in my top 5, but I really loved it. Pulling those rereads out of the running leaves me with 14 books to rank. So starting with my 2-star reads, at the very bottom of the list, of course, is going to be the one book that I DNF'd, and that was The Secret Scripture by Sebastian Barry. Next, I have I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, followed by Hex by Thomas Oldhuvelt, and then The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. My 1 3-star book was If You See Her by Anya Alborn. At the bottom of my 4-star books, I have Darkest Hours by Mike Thorne, Come Closer by Sarah Gran, The Nightmare Room by Chris Sorensen, which is the first book in the Messy Man series, followed by All Systems Red by Martha Wells, which is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. Alright, that brings me to my top 5. Once I took Assassin's Quest out of the running, that left me with 3 5-star books, so 2 of my 4-star reads made it into my top 5. So in 5th place, I have Pet Sematary by Stephen King. This was my second Stephen King that I had read, and I enjoyed it so much more than my first Stephen King. I had previously read Salem's Lot, and I gave that 2 stars. I thought it was absolutely boring and I did not like it. This one was so much better, which I was pretty sure it was going to be because it's gotten so many great reviews from people that I trust. Pet Sematary is a story set in the New England area, as many Stephen King novels are, and it's about a man who moves his family to this town because he just got a job as the university doctor. The house that he moves into is on a busy street, and a neighbor warns him to be careful with his pets because the road is known for pets getting run over. And because of that, there is actually a pet cemetery that is located behind his house. Stephen King is really known for his character work, and that's definitely something that I got out of this book. I really enjoyed getting to know these characters, and they just felt so real to me. This book was a lot creepier than I was expecting, creepy in a different way than what I was expecting, and I really liked that. This book also didn't have any like weird things that sometimes sneaks into some of Stephen King's books, which I really appreciated because I don't really want to read any of the weird Stephen King stuff. I also really liked the ending. I thought it ended really well, especially because multiple books I had read over the course of the fall were horror books with endings that I did not like. So it was really refreshing and a relief to find a horror book with an ending that I really enjoyed. Also, I listened to this on audiobook, which I highly recommend. It is narrated by Michael C. Hall, who is Dexter from the TV show Dexter. He is a really talented narrator, and I thoroughly enjoyed his narration of the story, and I'm definitely going to seek out some more audiobooks that he narrates because I thought he did a fantastic job. Definitely recommend the audiobook if you're going to pick this one up. I had been told that this was one of Stephen King's best books, and I can totally see why. I did only give it 4 stars and not 5. I really enjoyed it, but I just didn't like over the top love it. It's a little hard to put my finger on exactly why, but it just wasn't a 5-star book for me, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to check out more Stephen King. Stephen King has a huge backlist, so definitely recommend to me your favorite Stephen King novels. Alright, coming in 4th on my list, I have Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey, which is the first book in the Expanse series, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, although it was definitely a high 4 out of 5 stars, which is why it made my top 5. This is an adult science fiction book, and some of you might be familiar with the TV show that's based on the series called The Expanse. I have watched like 2 or 3 episodes of the show, but I didn't quite get into it, and I decided I wanted to read the books first. I did do this one as a buddy read with Rachel from The Shades of Orange and Julie from A Girl in a Book. I will link their channels in the description box, and it was so much fun to read this with other people. It was a reread for Rachel. This is one of her favorite series, but it was a first time read for both me and Julie. The setup for this book was really interesting. It has multiple perspectives, or maybe it's a dual perspective. I don't quite remember, but definitely more than one. And this is set in the future of our world. So there are people who live on Earth, there are people who live on Mars, and there are people who live out in space, like on space stations and stuff. All 3 of these factions have different cultures, which I thought was really fascinating, and different perspectives on things. You do follow 2 different perspectives because you have one storyline that is about a cop who is trying to investigate the disappearance of a girl, and the other storyline is about a guy who is like second in command of a mining ship that mines water or something, and while he's doing something is on like another ship, his whole crew gets blown up, and basically he is trying to figure out who is responsible for blowing up his whole ship, and in the course of trying to figure that out, inevitably starts a war in space. Not only did I really enjoy the world building in this book, but I also really liked the characters. The pacing in this book was really good. I was like never bored. There was always something going on. It kept switching back and forth between the 2 different storylines, and then at some point, of course, the 2 storylines do converge, which was really exciting. Something that I wasn't expecting going into this book is that there is a little bit of a horror element, and I really enjoyed that. I remember texting the group chat just being ecstatic that this thing happened that I wasn't expecting and I absolutely loved. In some ways, it's kind of a genre bender because it's obviously science fiction, but like I said, there is a horror element, which I have heard isn't as prevalent or as a big deal in the rest of the series. But then it's also a little bit of like a detective mystery story because you have that detective storyline where he's trying to figure out what happened to this missing girl. And I think it would appeal to a lot of people who aren't necessarily big sci-fi fans, but want to maybe get into sci-fi. I really love this book, and I'm excited to be continuing on in the series. I did put the second book in the series on my TBR for the winter, so hopefully I get to it really soon. It is technically a series that is still in progress, but I think the last book in the series is coming out sometime in 2020, but if not in 2020, then probably in 2021. But the series is like 7 books long, so I have plenty of time to get there. Okay, that brings me to my top 3 books, and these are all my 5-star books. I had such a hard time putting these in an order, so they're all very close with each other. But coming in 3rd place, I have The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This is an adult mystery thriller, and it was my first introduction to Ruth Ware, but I will definitely be reading more Ruth Ware in the future, although I have heard some people say this was their favorite Ruth Ware, but hopefully I still enjoy her other books when I read them. This one was about a nanny who gets a nanny job in this like isolated house, and the last 3 nannies that were hired all quit because they thought the house was haunted. The story is told in a little bit of an epistolary format, although once you get into the book, you kind of forget that it's epistolary. But the nanny is currently in jail because she has been accused of murdering one of the children that she was nannying, and she is writing a letter to someone that she wants to represent her in court. And so she's trying to explain to this lawyer everything that happened while she was a nanny to these kids and explain why she's not guilty. This book was so much fun. I did listen to it on audiobook. I think the narrator is really talented, so I definitely recommend the audiobook if you're an audiobook kind of person. I also did this as a buddy read with Murphy from Murphy Napier. I will link her channel down below, although let's be real, you guys know who she is. And it was really fun to discuss this book with her as I was reading. I thought this book was really well paced. I was constantly intrigued and wanting to know what was going to happen. One thing that I really liked is that you don't know which of the kids is dead while you're reading the book. It's not revealed until the end. So the whole time I was reading, I just kept wondering which of these kids was gonna die. I also thought Ruth Ware did a really good job of like giving plausible explanations of what was going on. So I also was constantly wondering if there was some sort of paranormal explanation or if there was like a realistic explanation for what was happening. There was also a dash of romance, like I thought the perfect amount of romance. And I just, oh my gosh, I had so much fun reading this. I really liked the way that it ended. I think the ending could be a little hit or miss with people. I could see why people wouldn't like the way that it ended, but I was really satisfied and overall just really happy with it, which is why I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And then my second favorite book that I read in the fall was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This was also my first introduction to Riley Sager, and I will definitely be reading more Riley Sager in the future. I had heard of his books before, but was kind of on the fence about reading them, and now I'm definitely gonna have to go back and read his 2 previous releases. This was also a buddy read. I had really good luck with buddy reads this season. I read this again with Rachel from The Shades of Orange and Julie from A Girl in a Book. This is an adult mystery thriller. This is about a young woman who, within a span of a day or a few days, loses her job, finds out her boyfriend, who she was living with, was cheating on her, so she breaks up with her boyfriend and moves out. So now she needs a job and a place to live. Well, she comes across a job listing for an apartment sitter in this really fancy building in New York called the Bartholomew. The job pays incredibly well and is a little bit hard to believe, but she gets an interview and learns that the job also comes with some really strange rules, like she can't have guests and she has to spend every night in the apartment. Despite these kind of weird rules, she really needs a place to live and a job, and so she takes the job when it's offered to her. I think this book will hit a chord with a lot of people in like my generation, maybe a little bit younger than me, at least in the United States, who are like familiar with underemployment or unemployment. Again, I really liked the characters in this book. They felt very real to me, especially the main character. I also thought Riley Sager did a fantastic job of writing women characters. If you don't know, Riley Sager is actually a man, and I'm always a little hesitant. I mean, I won't not read a book that has a female main character that was written by a man, but I'm always a little like unsure how it's gonna go. But if I didn't know that Riley Sager was a man, I would have thought that he was a woman because he wrote the main character so realistically as a woman. Again, I thought this book had great pacing. I was constantly engaged and wanting to know what was gonna happen next, which made it really fun to buddy read. I really like the twists and turns in this book. There were a few things that I definitely saw coming, but there were also things that like I thought were going one way only to have them go a totally different way. So I really enjoyed being surprised, especially doing this as a buddy read because we were like texting our predictions and what we thought was going on. So when things kind of took a turn and were different than what we were thinking, that was a lot of fun. I really liked the atmosphere in this book. There was a dash of romance as well, like just the perfect amount of romance. And I really liked the ending. I thought the ending was super satisfactory, and considering that this year I had a string of books with endings I hated, I was really glad that I liked the ending. If you have read Riley Sager's other books, let me know which one was your favorite, because I am definitely going to be reading more Riley Sager, and he sort of recently announced another book coming out next summer that I am very excited about. Alright, that brings us to my favorite book of the fall, and that book was Obsidio by Aimee Kaufman and Kristoff. This is the third and final book in the Illuminae series. This is a YA science fiction book, and if you haven't heard of this series before, one thing that's unique about it is that it's kind of told in mixed media format. So it's not a traditional novel, it's kind of epistolary. I don't know, maybe that's not the right term, but it's told through like chat logs and illustrations and text that's supposed to be like transcribed from video files. Basically, in the first book in the series, a planet comes under attack, and the main characters in that book escape from that attack. These chat logs and these files that you're reading have been put together as evidence against a company that is being accused of attacking people on a planet. It's really hard to explain. Definitely go check out the Goodreads page for the first book in the series. But each book in the series focuses on a different couple, but then the characters from the previous book play a role in the later books. So in this last book, we have a new couple, but also all of the previous characters as well. The first two books in the series each had a different horror element in them, and this last book didn't exactly have a traditional horror element, but I thought this last book really portrayed the horrors of war and explored how sometimes good people can do bad things when they're in bad situations, and that's just like a theme that I really love exploring. I found this last book to be really heart-wrenching. I cried at the end, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't think I was that emotionally attached to these characters just because of the way the story is told through like multimedia. I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, but because it's not told in a traditional narrative format where you're like really inside the characters' heads, I didn't think I had grown that attached to these characters, but apparently I had, because I was very emotionally affected by the end of this book, which totally caught me off guard. It is the last book in the series, and I thought that it was a fantastic finale. I think I've heard that people were disappointed in this as a finale, but I did not feel that way. I thought it was a solid ending. I thought everything got wrapped up in a satisfactory way, and I really enjoyed it. I also listened to this on audiobook, so this series, a lot of people recommend the audiobook, and I do too. All of the audiobooks are done with a full cast, and there's a lot of like sound effects and things that they do, so the audiobook is fantastic. But I also really recommend having a physical copy because I wouldn't want anybody to miss out on the cool format of this book. My favorite way to read the series was to listen to the audiobook while I was looking at the physical book, which I know is not something that everybody can or wants to do, but if I was to recommend a way to read it, that would be the way I would recommend. If you had asked me at the beginning of the season, the reading season, if I thought that Obsidio would be my favorite book of the season, I would have definitely said no. I was not expecting this book to come out on top, but I had so much fun reading it, and I just was so emotionally affected by the ending, which I, like I said, was not expecting at all, and I just loved it so much. Alright guys, that brings us to the end of the video. Those are the 5 best books that I read in the fall. If you have read any of these books, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and let me know what your favorite book you read in the fall was. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.